Hi, welcome back to another episode of Ajita Nathaki. I am Oshaya. Um, I'm not very good about remembering to introduce myself, and I got some good feedback that I need to be mindful of that. Also, um, some of you may need a little bit of a reminder as to why you're even watching this channel. I have been a spiritual practitioner for, oh God, I don't know, 20 some odd years, but I've been a teacher of spirituality for uh, about 10, I think, somewhere thereabouts, maybe more. I lost track. Yeah, I think more than 10. Anyway, I I've been prompted by the masters, and I'll explain who the masters are in some future episode. I think it's too soon still to put together this channel and share this information with you in the hopes that it may help you live a better life. This is not some form of self-help kind of a channel. It's rather about spirituality and spiritual questions. So if you have any such questions, please put them down in the chat. Um, Today's topic has actually been proposed to me by one of my students, colleagues, if you will. And this actual topic is not really what she asked for. What she asked for is the follow-up. But in order for me to address the follow-up, I have to give you the basics. And today's topic is on reincarnation. So this topic, if you watch the intro, which is not that many episodes ago, you'll get a little bit of a background as to how I got into spirituality and why I followed the route of reincarnation in particular. But I'll just go into a little bit more detail here and not spend so much time on what I already said. So I have a background in science, and having that kind of a frame of mind about the world, about experience, about knowledge, I needed to have a way of explaining some things that were happening in my life that now I would term psychic, and they needed to be explained in a way that made sense to me, again, with my background in physics in particular. So one of those concepts has to do with, how does the system improve, or why would it improve? And I overheard a conversation, I already said that in the intro, but essentially there was this concept of a system that is designed in order to improve the outcome. With each repeated cycle, the person gets better. The idea is that the spirit reaches perfection at some point in time. And, the number of iterations of that process is perhaps not so important, but the idea is that regardless of what happens, the ultimate outcome at the end of all those cycles is spiritual perfection. So that's the idea behind reincarnation. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, there's the notion of heaven and hell. And by the way, to my knowledge, and I have read most of the Bible, I cannot recall a moment, a chapter, where hell is described in the way in which American culture, Western culture for that matter, portrays hell. You will find the instances of that first described in Dante's Inferno, and then again in John Milton's Paradise Lost. And those are the two most well-known sources of the human concept of hell. And I'm sure that the Asian cultures have their own sources, perhaps tied to some other writers, but it really comes from the world of fiction. Okay, so just understand that. Dante's Inferno, John Milton's Paradise Lost, these are works of fiction. And anything dealing or describing a hell is just that, a work of fiction. Now, why am I penchant on that? Well, the thing is that when I was a kid, I was raised Catholic. I guess you could tell, Mexican. That this would be my dominant frame of mind, perspective, worldview, because that's the way that I was raised. But again, having a scientific background, I could not rationalize one lifetime, regardless of how it was lived, good or bad or whatever, uh, and earning an eternity of bliss or suffering, one or the other. And it just logically doesn't make any sense, right? And if I, at the age of 13, 14, could clearly rationalize that, then I'm sure that an infinitely wise being would know better than to do something as stupid as that, right? So I abandoned at that tender age the notions of what religion was telling us in terms of heaven and hell. It made no sense. So because of that, I kind of walked away from religion for quite a while until I came upon a more scientific explanation to what happens, um, after we pass away. And there are many accounts that you can go to that you could easily find accounts of near-death experiences. Um, More common, well, more recently, there is the work, and I forget the name of the author, but it's a family, and it was written by the father. But it's an experience that his son had quite recently. The book is There Is a Heaven, and it was made into a movie by the same title. Another work that is also somewhat similar, although it wasn't made into a movie, is Dying to Be Me. I cannot recall the names of the authors. I'm sure you can look them up and find them. Those are examples of near-death experiences, and there have been many others. Entire books dedicated to studying one lifetime after. I mean, an example of another person going through the near-death experience. And actually, let me pause here and say I really do not like the term near-death, because all of these incidents, the people actually died. They were clinically dead, recorded as dead by medical practitioners, doctors, and later they were resuscitated or they resuscitated themselves. In many of cases, the doctors, they did nothing. The person just came back, and so they're called near death because I guess from a human point of view, they got really close to it and then they came back. But in reality, they were resuscitated. They died, came back, and so they had an experience. And if you look at those experiences and those accounts, they describe pretty much the same type of thing. Each one is a little different, but there's so much commonality between them that it's just hard to ignore. There are also instances of children that recall past life experiences. There have been documentaries done on this, and I'm sure you can find them. They have been on the Standard 3 network, CBS, ABC, forget the other one. Sorry, I don't watch network television anymore. I actually don't watch TV at all. I stopped many years ago, but anyway, it was on one of those networks. So this has been something that has been in recent years, and I'm talking in the last 20 to 30, something that has been researched quite a bit, and a lot has come to be known about it. And many of these cases are documented. You can actually research them online. I'm sure you can find YouTube videos on children remembering past lives, on near-death experiences. And while those are interesting and certainly do present a pattern about what the experience is like after death, there are other books that really take a more methodical scientific approach to the documentation. And one of those, and I think the preeminent one, the very first one that really made a big splash, was the work of Dr. Brian Weiss, Many Lives, Many Masters. And I'll leave it to you to read the preface and the introduction to that book. He makes his own very good point there. The notion then is it's pretty consistent with what near-death experiences have described, with what children have described, and what other individuals since Dr. Wise have also discovered in their own research, also scientific, and have come to describe a very similar process. Another one of those authors, by the way, is Gary Zukov. He's the author of Seat of the Soul in that series. So anyway, I come to this idea of reincarnation through having studied all of that, and I've read many books on each of those genres that I just described. But I think it's really well encapsulated in the work of Edgar Cayce. And I'm going to repeatedly point you in his direction. And the There are many books that have been written by other folks based on the readings that Edgar Casey gave. People that have spent hours and hours just combing through the various readings to come to little nuggets of information that they have then expertly tied together into a particular topic or theme. And so I'll leave it to you to research those particular works. But there's a lot of information in Edgar Casey. And by the way, all of this just, they gel with one another. They reinforce one another. And there is a very consistent pattern about this. Now, as I've been prepping the notes for this particular video, I've been thinking about, well, what if I don't believe in reincarnation? That's irrelevant, whether you believe in it or not. Let me put it this way. The sun rises in the east, whether you believe in it or not. The earth is round, or spherical rather, whether you believe it or not. These things are just the way things are. They're going to continue to be this way. And regardless of whether you accept it or not, this is the cycle in which you are in. Okay, as a human being, you're caught up in it. Okay, so then what is it that these lifetime, this reincarnation process, what is it for? What is the goal here? Right. So as I mentioned earlier, it's a process by which we can achieve spiritual perfection so that we may return back to God's consciousness. In other words, that we will be endowed with the Christ-like conscience and retain awareness of ourselves while also achieving God's consciousness. In other words, you would be both a drop in the ocean and the ocean itself all at once. You will have awareness of both. And it is possible because I did have a vision of something very similar to that. And yeah, a very powerful experience. I will never forget it for the rest of my life. But it is possible to retain the awareness of those two things while just being immersed in this most overwhelming feeling of love and understanding. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it's unity, it's love, it's understanding, it's just peace to have experienced it. Okay, so in the process of reincarnation, many folks have come to know of certain terms like karma, and I think popular culture describes karma, or has treated karma in movies and other fictional works, as something like punishment, or a comeuppance or something like that. And that's not really how it works. It can be interpreted in that way in a sense, and you wouldn't be too far off from how it actually functions. However, it is actually somewhat different. Let me explain. Having a background in physics, I'm familiar with Newton's third law, which is that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction, right? So the idea here is in terms of karma. If I commit an act of violence against you, then in another lifetime, you will commit a similar act of violence against me. And the idea there is not vengeance, it's not retribution. That's not really what justice is about in the gods of, rather in the eyes of God. But rather, it is an opportunity to experience the other's perspective. Say, for example, that I felt, a tremendous grief, a loss, because you killed my child in some past life. And out of anger and spite and retribution, I kill you, right? Or someone related to your clan, let's say, figure, a snake is a snake regardless, to quote Malcolm X. So if we were to then explain, this is the why it happened, a father, getting some kind of justice or retribution because his child was murdered, one could say, okay, well, he's justified. We could, not that it is, but I think that some people can understand, oh, okay, well, yeah, if that had happened to me, I could understand. Right? But if you were the member of the clan, the other clan, and you don't know why this person is killing you, you would have hatred and animosity. You would have an upwelling of anger and hatred towards this person who was committing this act against you. So the idea then is that by switching roles, you will understand what it's like to be the other. Right? So if in one case I am the victim, in the future case I may be the person who is committing the atrocity. And in living that experience, I will know the feelings. I will know what it is that compelled that individual to behave that way. And instead of retaining that sense of anger, I will instead have a feeling of compassion for the loss of that person, the sadness, the heartache that that person must be experiencing, and extend out of a sense of common humanity an understanding of what that must be, and then extend forgiveness. And if I can do that in that cycle, then the lesson has played out, and I have learned my lesson as spirit, and I move on then to another spiritual lesson. So that's the idea of karma. It's not that it's a punishment, but rather it's an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to understand the other's perspective, right? I'll give you another example. Say, for example, you are a slave and you are beaten, oppressed, all of the atrocities that we know that were committed during slavery, and actually slavery still exists in the world. And think of all the hatred that would be retained by the slave towards his slave owner, his oppressor, and just all that vitriol that would be bottled up. And, in another lifetime, the slave would become a person of the majority race, and, feel the need to be racist against that person in another lifetime, and thereby understand that racism is learned. And by the way, this happens whether you're in Russia, China, America, South Africa. It happens all over the world. The Chinese do it to other Chinese, the Japanese do it to other Japanese. It's a pretty common human activity, feeling, emotion. It's always learned. It is never justified. And so the process of reincarnation gives souls an opportunity to experience the other, to develop compassion, to develop understanding. And you will, if you are trapped in that cycle, you will be the other repeatedly. You will be the racist. You will be the person oppressed. You will be, that repeatedly until you develop that understanding, until you let go of violence, until you break the cycle yourself. Not that the cycle will be broken for you. The responsibility is on you to break that pattern, not on anyone else to do it for you. So you have to develop compassion. You have to develop understanding. You have to develop forgiveness and genuinely forgive and walk away from it all. And then you will break that cycle. So the people that we see out there in the world right now trapped in that cycle, that's pretty much what's happening until they each individually break it. And that's the topic that I'm going to address in the upcoming video. So what if you have gone through a few of those experiences, and you've learned, and you've said, okay, I'm done with this, I've broken the cycle, I'm done, right? And then you live another karmic experience, not exactly the same thing, but something analogous, where you're the oppressor or the aggrieved individual, one or the other. And then you understand before the pattern is repeated, like, oh, wait. All right, let me then do the right thing and be kind to the other, be nice, be understanding, be forgiving. And even though the full karma has not played itself out, applying a spiritual lesson from something else to this new experience is an act of grace. And that engenders forgiveness, and that erases the karma. So grace is much more powerful than karma, and it does exist, it does happen, but it has to come from the individual genuinely as a spiritual lesson mastered without having to go through the pain and suffering of that spiritual lesson. Generosity, kindness, forgiveness, given before it is demanded or expected. Those are moments of grace where you can break the chain of karma before it even begins, or that would be the way of breaking the chain of karma, depending on the situation. Okay, I've given a couple scenarios already. I want to give another one. This one has to do with, people talk, or rather, they question, why would there be a God so loving, so compassionate, so forgiving, that would allow a young child to die? The child, in their eyes, has done nothing to deserve that kind of suffering, right? If the idea is that in one lifetime you go through certain experiences, good or bad, and then you deserve some outcome, good or bad, depending on what you did. A child then, not being fully aware of what he or she is doing, would not engender upon him or herself, an eternity of suffering or eternity of bliss, because, it just really hasn't had that opportunity yet, the child. So that's one reason that a lot of people hold for not believing in God, because why would God allow such a thing? Well, in the process of reincarnation, souls enter into experiences, sometimes for their own growth, sometimes for the growth of others. We help each other out. I will explain this idea of soul group a little bit later on. But a child would come into that experience as a gift of compassion to the parents. It may not necessarily be the case that the child has any kind of karma, and it's not the intent for it to suffer, but rather by the child passing away early, there's then an opportunity for the parents to come together and deal with the loss in a way that is ultimately productive for their own spiritual development. If they allow themselves to wallow in depression, in anger, in resentment, and lash out in some kind of hate or violence or something that is a grieving to their souls, they will repeat this pattern again until they pass the test properly. And so here's an opportunity for two souls to move past that in a healthy way that looks to the experience with positivity, in the sense of we're grateful for having had the opportunity to love that child, to hold that child, being thankful for those years, those moments, those memories, and just holding on to the positive and to let go of the negative, because that child in a future life will come back, will have another opportunity for relationship building. And so we think that these lifetimes that this is it, and the reality is that you have multiple opportunities to enter into those relationships. You don't have to be attached to the notion that this is it, this is the only one. You will see that child again, and just having that acceptance that God works for our benefit. God has our best plan in mind. God wants what is ultimately for our biggest and most lasting joy. If we trust in that and just accept the experiences that we are going through as opportunities for development, then we will move ahead faster. Okay. So here's where I come into this idea of we are helping each other out. Everybody that you have a major relationship with is someone with whom you've had other lifetimes, and you are helping each other learn and develop, to pass certain tests, to have certain experiences, to learn certain spiritual concepts. And so the person who was your mother in one lifetime may be your daughter in another, may be your wife in a third. That person who was your boss may be your father may at some point be your best friend. It really, you cannot constrain it, you cannot define it. We play so many different roles to help each other grow and develop. And we don't always incarnate with the exact same group of people. And if I were to say, like in the letters of the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, you're not always going to incarnate with A, B, C, D, E, F. Sometimes you will have G, W, X, so on down the line. So let's say that there's a group of 26, you may incarnate with a group of 10. In another lifetime, it may be like 5 of these and 10 of those. So it can vary. So don't think that it's always the same souls over and over and over again each and every single lifetime. It doesn't work like that. Think of it as a classroom. In a classroom, there would be maybe 30, 35, I don't know, depending on the grade level, I suppose. 23, I guess, in the lower grades, depending on. Anyway, my point is that there will be a varying number of souls in your soul group, and you will incarnate with a limited number of those in different lifetimes. Nonetheless, you are all together in a group, and the idea is that the whole class is working for the betterment of each individual in the class. You're there as helpmates. So even though in one lifetime there may be a relationship that goes sour, that is painful, that is unpleasant, in another lifetime it may be just the opposite, and you are the unpleasant. Well, anyway, you could be the one with the issues. And the idea here is that we're providing for each other those opportunities to help and grow. So this idea of soul group then, this is what a soulmate is. Those individuals that you meet for the very first time, that you may have this unexplainable notion, this understanding that you've had other lifetimes, or that, well, maybe not, you wouldn't think of that necessarily, but that you know this person. You don't know why you know this person, but you know this person, right? Those individuals with whom you have an immediate connection, and you cannot necessarily explain it in rational terms, but you just know it. I'm not even going to say you feel it, because you don't. You just know it, right? So those are typically the individuals that are part of your soul group. And those are the individuals that you will gravitate to in one lifetime after another. And this idea of soul group then comes into play in the explanation for the upcoming video. So the idea then is that as we move through that soul group, the group may elevate, right, at all of them together, and then there will be some individuals that can proceed out of the group a little faster than others, and they may go into another group. Or there may be a soul that is a little slower in learning some spiritual lessons, and then maybe held back. It's a weird analogy, but just reassigned to another group, and that can happen. So the notion then of this soul group is that we are helping each other through our experiences, that we have love, compassion for each other, even though sometimes those experiences may be tough, may be challenging, may be unpleasant. Ultimately, they are for our best good, and ultimately they move us forward if we react properly, if we act with compassion, if we are understanding, if we are kind. So if we move in that direction with those frames of mind, with that desire to be good and kind to one another, regardless of your religious background, whether you believe in whether you're a Muslim, a Jew, a Christian, a Buddhist, Taoist, Sufi, you name it, Hindu, whether you believe in reincarnation or not, all that matters is that you move through life in kindness, in generosity, in understanding, in self-discipline, in diligence, whatever are the virtues that you hold dear, if you hold on to those and live your life in that way, you will eventually break the cycle of reincarnation. And now, reincarnation is almost by definition here on earth, because it's, as the word carne, meaning flesh, uh, it's limited to this kind of an experience. There are other realms of spiritual development, other dimensions. If you read the work of Edgar Cayce, or rather the work that others have written about his readings, then you will hear a lot more, read a lot more about, what those other dimensions are like. Not that they go into a lot of detail, because ultimately you are here on this planet, you are basically stuck in the cycle of human reincarnation, and your goal then should be just to exit out of this human reincarnation cycle and move on to other realms of higher spiritual development, and then progress as we move further and further along to return back to God. Okay, so that's the topic of reincarnation. I know it's a bit long, but by the way, I left out a lot, but just in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and pause it here. But if you have any questions, if you have any other details, things that I may have missed, if you can put them in the comments below, I'll try to respond to those. I do check periodically. I'm not going to say that I do this like every single day. I live a quite busy life, but I will try to get to answers if you have any questions. All right, take care. Bye-bye.